Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
Well, you get the best passport you can because you unfortunately need your papers in order to do anything. So in the meantime, don't live in the country that taxes you. You can still do that if you're a European. So that's the first step. This whole thing about internationalizing yourself is very important because your biggest risks in the world today are not so much financial or economic, and those are huge, they're gigantic. Your biggest risks today are political, and the only way to get around them is to diversify politically, which is why, I have residences in 3 countries at the moment. And I suggest that everybody that's in a position to do that, do so. And if you're not in a position to do it, get into a position to do it.
Well, that man is Doug Casey, in case you don't know. He's someone a man that I admire a lot. He's known as the International Man. He's a very successful best-selling author and also a very successful entrepreneur and investor. Well, we are going to review a few lessons that Doug Casey has for us and also for your probable endeavor in Venezuela. And the first one is, if you don't have a second passport, get one, and if you're not in position to do so, get in a position to do so. Well, regarding Venezuela, what you can do, you can get a second residency and a passport. Eventually, it's hard to do it. It's gonna take a lot of time and a lot of commitment to do so. But meanwhile, I encourage everyone that gets a second, a third, a fourth, fifth passport and paper residencies and such, and for obvious reasons, but mostly, and this is the key takeaway from this segment, is that the biggest risk that we have right now as citizens of the world is not so much economical or financial, that is huge, like Doug Casey said, but the biggest risks are political. So the way that you hedge your political risk is getting a bunch of passports and residencies and knowing a lot of territory.
I go today, I would definitely go to Africa because, like I said before, I think I said it before, I want to go someplace where it's an on-level playing field. I want to go someplace where my skills and education and background and capital, hey, there's 100 million guys like me in the US and Canada. We all have the same kind of background. But if I go to the Congo or Nigeria or Central African Republic, I'm unique. I can bring things to their party that are needed and wanted and automatically, get clocked in. Infinite desire for goods and services on the part of every human being on this planet. Everybody wants to have a nice house, a nice car, so forth. So, you can't do that for them, but you can go to these places and you can figure out, what can I bring to these people through my, what everybody has in the West, but they don't bring it here. So that's what I would do if I was a young guy today. To qualify myself, you just can't be, a guy that goes there and hangs around, can't bring anything to the party. But after you qualify yourself, which you should do by the time you're in your early 20s, that's where you want to go. That's the part of the world you want to go, in my opinion. No, I don't see it as a good place to live, particularly, no.
Go there, do business, get out.
That's the way I see it, because it's very unstable, and I think it's going to become more unstable. And let's admit it, when it comes to convenience, the U.S. and Canada and the EU are very convenient. You get everything you want.
Dubai, Singapore.
Right, exactly. But like I said, I want to go where I'm in an unleveled playing field that's tilted in my direction. Everybody can benefit that way. So that's what I would do.
Good advice. Unlevel playing field.
Key word.
Number two is go to a country where you are on an unlevel playing field. And the particular case in Venezuela is that, yes, if you are someone from a Western nation and also you provide value to be economical and also with your mindset, yes, you can thrive a lot here if you know what you're doing, but at the same time, you're going to bring a lot of value that maybe is scarce here in the country. So maybe on that regard, yes, Venezuela can be an uneven playing field for you if you know what you're doing, of course, on your favor.
I think we're on the cusp of what I call the Greater Depression. And a depression is a period of time when most people's standard of living drops significantly. And right now, we're in the eye of the storm. The government has printed up, well, not just the U.S. government, but all the world's governments, printed up trillions and trillions of dollars of currency units. And it's given people an artificial sense of prosperity. If we deposited $10,000 in everybody's bank account tonight, they'd wake up and think they were a lot richer tomorrow. Well, they wouldn't be, but they would go out and start buying stuff and that would create a business cycle, giving all kinds of false signals to the economy. So I think we're at the cusp of something actually that's going to be the biggest disaster that we've seen since the Industrial Revolution. Not that that was a disaster, that was one of the best things that's ever happened in all of history. But these are very, very dangerous times. And this is just the lull before the storm right now as we speak. We're in Indian summer, as it were. She's not. She's got no understanding of economics at all. She's an embarrassment. But hopefully the economy collapses. I think it will while she's in office. And she'll be blamed for it. Much of it will be justifiable. But I'm not looking forward to the collapse of the U.S. and therefore the world economy. And the reason for that is that when things get bad and people start losing their houses and kicked out of their apartments, once the, what do they call this, where they don't have to pay their rent and mortgages?
The moratoriums.
Yeah, on payments. When that comes to an end, they're going to owe back mortgage payments. That's a debt that's not going to go away. And you're actually going to owe back rent to the landlord who needs it.
A lot of people are going to be shocked.
They're going to be shocked. They're getting this big bill. Most of them have pissed away their stimmy money. And they're going to be out on the street living under bridges. The government won't let that happen. No. So the government will have to print trillions more to bail them out.
Number three is that we are headed toward a greater depression worldwide, and this is going to affect the US, Canada, Australia, Western Europe, Japan, you name it, but also a bunch of nations in Latin America because they are dependent on, of course, the trade and such. However, Venezuela might be the place for you on such greater depression because we already suffer our greater depression. It was huge, it was bad, it was ugly, 80% GDP collapse. However, the thing is there is not much left to destroy. So Venezuela could be one of the few countries that is gonna thrive during this Great Depression. First, because we don't have anything more to destroy. The second thing is because Venezuela is an oil-rich country, and also this is very important because the worldwide politics and geopolitical situation is going to a bipolar stage, where for one hand you have the Western nations that everyone is going to suffer this very probable and eventual greater depression, but at the same token you have The other countries that are not as good friends with the US, like China, Russia, all the BRIC nations, I'm talking Brazil, I'm talking South Africa, and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries are joining as well. And Venezuela is on that club. So if they are great and they're going to do mingle and do business with each other, Venezuela has a great opportunity to thrive during this Great Depression.
I live most of the time in Argentina and Uruguay. And look, one of the nice things about so-called third world countries is that the governments are much less efficient and much less effectual than in the U.S. And all of these third world countries tend to be actually much more corrupt than the U.S. The U.S. is still, among the good things about it, is it's still a relatively high trust society. There's not a lot of corruption, really.
You could argue spending $1 billion to run for president seems a little corrupt.
You're right. You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. But in the U.S., it's generally dangerous to bribe a cop if he pulls you over. It can be, it's done all the time, but it's generally dangerous to bribe. You got to be careful to bribe most government officials. But in the third world, it's not only not so dangerous, but it's kind of expected. So the U.S. is moving in that direction, though, obviously. But that's a double-edged sword, because when you have all these laws, if you don't have corruption, and if they enforce those stupid laws, of which there are millions, well, you can't do anything. So corruption actually becomes a good thing.
You're saying in the U.S. it's hard to do anything.
Yes, exactly. We got all these laws, but it's hard to get around them. And
Number 4 is the advantage of the third world country. Venezuela is, of course, a third world nation. And also we have a lot of the downfalls of being a third world nation. But also we have the advantages of a third world nation. So if you come here, and Casey already mentioned the corruption and such, and said corruption on some cases can be good. Well, let's say that in Venezuela we have a lot of good on that regard. So yeah, maybe that could work for you as well.
it's absolutely going to fall apart. And that's a very good thing. But it goes further than that, because not only is the EU going to fall apart, but just as Yugoslavia broke up into 6 republics, Soviet Union broke up into 15, I think what you're going to see is Italy break up into, I don't know how many.
The balkanization of the rest of Europe, Western Europe.
I think so. People forget that it was only like 1871 when Germany came together from scores of principalities and dukedoms and kingdoms. And Italy, when was Garibaldi? I guess that was the 1850s. When Italy became that's going to break up to Spain, the Catalans,
Catalonia,
the Basques.
And finally break away, yeah.
Yes, and it'll be a good thing. And,
they have all the wealth.
Well, actually, yeah, that's right. That's right, they do. Much more productive than the rest of Spain generally. And then, of course, England, Scotland should break off. Maybe Wales, too. I mean, this is...
Do you think the same thing happens in the U.S.?
Yes, I do. In fact, it's worse in the U.S. because we're likely to have an actual civil war. And not like what happened, the unpleasantness of 1861 to 65. That wasn't a civil war, incidentally. That's a total misnomer. It was a war of secession. And a civil war is one where 2 or more groups are contesting for the control of one government in one land area. That's a civil war. A war of secession is just where one group wants to separate from another group. So the Civil War in the U.S. wasn't about slavery. It was really about economics, but that's a whole different story. But yes, I think we're heading towards a real civil war this time, because these people in red counties and blue, they hate each other. They can't talk, cannot communicate. They think each other's evil. And it won't end well.
Well, number 5 is also the situation on the European Union that I think is gonna go from bad to worse. When I see the European Union, beautiful places, and basically every country in Europe is gorgeous, regarding if it's in the EU or not. But at the same time, they always talk about this good standard of living on Europe. But I see most people in Western Europe, they are poor. I have to say it, and this comes from a Venezuelan. When I see, for instance, in Spain, when they basically everyone earns 1,000 or 1,500 euros and you don't have a surplus. You don't have a surplus of economic output. I'm talking on the personal level. So how in the world are you going to generate the sufficient income in order to have a good standard of living? And the key takeaway of having good standards of living, you have to have a very good surplus of economic output and financial revenue. So, and I see all these disastrous policies of the EU and such. So I'm not bullish on the European Union, I have to say. I'm bullish on the US, and I'm going right into that, but I'm not bullish on the European Union. It's extremely bureaucratic, and I don't see a good future on it. I'm talking in the next 10 or 20 years or so. For the other hand, he mentions a true civil war on the United States. I'm actually bullish on the very long term on the United States. It's a great country, probably the greatest nation that has existed in history. However, they need to depur a lot of bad decisions, financial, economically, socially, you name it. And it's going to take a while, maybe a decade or two. And meanwhile, maybe you can hang out in Venezuela. Meanwhile, everything is going on and all these things are happening.
If I was a citizen of it, I wouldn't want to live there because you're much freer, as you know, living outside of the country who issues your slave card to you.
Do you think at some time Italy or Germany or Belgium says, you know, we're going to do what the U.S. is doing. We're going to start taxing people. You have to pay something.
I think that's on the way. All these organizations like the IMF and the OECD and the UN, they're all the same, and they're all going for tax harmonization, they call it. So yeah, although the U.S. is now the only major country that you can't get the monkey off your back, I think they're all going to go that way until they fall apart.
And number 6, and this is scary for a lot of you guys, is the tax harmonization that you might see within the Western nations. We already know the United States is the only country that tax their citizens outside of their territory just for the fact that they are American. They have to pay taxes regardless of their location or their income stream, if there is foreign or not. So right now it's only the United States and Eritrea, I believe, country in Africa, but maybe they can hitch that wagon the other Western nations like Canada, like some of the Western Europe nations like Germany, like France. I don't see it on Switzerland, maybe Austria. Some of the biggest nations on the Western Europe, Spain, Italy, of course, are gonna bandwagon as well. So maybe it's time to start considering another tax location. I'm not saying Venezuela is the best tax location. It's not the worst, actually. It's very far for being the worst. Actually, it's very manageable, the tax situation, if you know what you're doing. Regardless, getting your tax residency and checking with your accountant and your lawyers and such, it wouldn't be a bad place to start. So please, if you enjoy Doug Casey and Doug Casey's idea, please leave on the comments what's your favorite. I'm going to review it and like my favorite. Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, VenezuelaInsider.com. Thanks again and have a nice day.